Okay, let's start this project off in Lightbox by clicking the Dynamesh sphere. And now that we have this in our scene, let's go to our window here, click and select the Z sphere. And we're going to use a Z sphere to build out the body of our character. I'm just going to upload a texture that I already loaded up here into our viewport. And we'll be making this cat here. Just going to move the sphere kind of to the hip area. And I'm just going to start drawing out spheres. Even though I have my hotkeys, I'll use the buttons up top as you would. I'm switching to editing modes for the Z spheres. Alright. And just moving these pieces into place. Kind of follow the form of his body. And go into my transforms and turn on symmetry. First I'm going to draw a joint here that will kind of form the shoulder area. Like so, by dragging another joint out. Okay, scaling it down. Switching to scale mode. And just pulling it outward a bit. And now pulling this down. Scaling it down some. Putting it into place. As you see, I'm occasionally switching to the front to add spheres. Adjusting some spheres. As these spheres is a great way to build out a mesh and kind of get introduced to the forms you'll be sculpting later. Now, the idea here is not to spend too much time on building a Z sphere model here, but just to get the areas you're going to need to sculpt. So we're going to get these feet in a moment. Just drawing out the joints that are kind of hidden under his skin here in a reference. So we got all parts of his leg, even though it'll be covered with the skin in that area. I still went ahead and put the joints in there for that. Like I said, you're definitely kind of being introduced to your subject matter. Even at this point, I've collected reference images. I'm still kind of learning about this Sphinx cat as we go forward. Just messing around with his shoulders and rotating them into place here. Just gonna pull this part down. I think we got mostly everything into place. Just gonna draw an extra sphere here. Kind of place that in the front of his face here. There is nose and mouth. Even scale it up. Okay. I'm gonna draw out some ears here. Draw another one. So give me a little bit more to work with. Okay, I'm just going to scale them down and move them around. And just like that, those ears are blocked out. Okay. Just look around. Make any final tweaks we might want before we turn this to actual geometry here. Sure to check from various camera angles. Press A to see what our geometry is looking like. You can open the adaptive skin properties and toggle the preview button. Just going to increase our density there and turn on preview. And now we have a bit more geometry there. I'm going to up the Dynamesh resolution, hit preview, let that process. Okay, it might be more subdivided than it looks. I'm just going to go ahead and click make adaptive skin, go to the generated mesh here, and it does have quite a bit of geometry. It's more geo than it looks. So I'm going to go ahead and get this smoothed out. Also went ahead and polygrouped everything. And as usual, use that negative values of that contrast slider. I'm just continuing to repeat the process. Okay. I want to work with perspective off. I'm going to go ahead and grab my Move Infinite Depth brush so I can kind of grab and pull things straight across my entire work scene here. And I'm just nudging things into place from this specific angle. And this is very similar to how the old school polygonal modeling techniques work. Lining up with your reference from your side view and then maybe your front view. We don't have a front view to work on, so we'll kind of just use our reference and an additional picture for the face. I'm just still nudging things around. Now just using a regular move brush. Just wiggling things into place. Okay. Let's see how things look with the floor off. I'm just going to work my way around, just making some corrections I can kind of spot check. I'll go into Dynamesh, lower the resolution, and Dynamesh. What I'm trying to do is remove some resolution so I can smooth better. That previous model had too much resolution. In fact, I'm going to lower it again. And that's one of the great things for Dynamesh. You can always lower your resolution because you can indeed have too much to kind of work efficiently in these early stages. As I said before, just going around making corrections, filling in some gaps that are our Z-Modeler base mesh kind of gave us. Just fine. It definitely sped up the process to getting a base mesh started here. And toggling on the reference on and off with that floor button, and just laying in some general strokes here and there, just trying to get a feel for the forms. Alright, some of these or a good deal of these might be smoothed away, but the idea is just to kind of build his anatomy as I kind of study it between the several reference images I have off screen. Just continue to work out some of these forms underneath and around the shoulder area. I don't see too much muscular forms in its body, mostly wrinkles, but I'm just trying to get those base forms and the general shape. One picture I had a hard time finding was any rear or top views of this cat, so that would have been great if I found that, because it definitely helps to have several angles of your subject matter, so you can always just quickly get a visual on how it looks. and then you can just use the tools to kind of get those results. Just widening his feet here and building a form while I'm seeing. Okay, like I said before, I don't have a front view image to line up in our scene, but I do have front views of the Sphinx cat. And I'm just working on those paws there. Okay, let's move on here. And in the draw menu, I'm going to switch to the left right and load up another image of a face previously uploaded. We're going to go ahead and scale it down, and we're going to just move this into position of our face of our model here using the vertical offset. And I'm just going to try to get it as close as possible to proportions. And this picture isn't symmetrical either, so we'll just be mostly working on the left side with symmetry on. Okay. All right. So next, I'm just gonna kind of move things into place and using that move brush, stretch those ears up. And this is one of the better kind of frontal images of a Sphinx cat I found. And also for our purposes, what we mostly need is the proportions, the layout, eyes, wrinkles, nose, mouth. I'm just hopping in the settings to see if we could flip the visibility, because we're actually viewing the rear side of the picture. And you can see the other angle was clearer, but there's no option for that, but that's fine. We can still get the info we need from this. Other option would be just to move our model or flip our model to see the clearer side, but this will work. Okay, occasionally rotating to see where the alignment of some of these elements are. I can always move them into place, but like I said, I'm more focused on the proportions of things. And let's see, I need to move that portion of his face forward a bit to make that eye, because it did not translate well at all. So I'm just gonna fill in or build up that area with the clay brush. Okay, like I said, just kind of move it forward and I'll be able to sculpt that position of those eyes. Okay, and we're just kind of all piecing this together. All right, it's just to help us get those placements quicker than if we just eyeballed it. Bit of move brush, or a lot of move brush as time goes on. Okay, let's turn back on that view. Now I'm going to deviate a bit from our side view as we work on the front. So that's something to keep in mind when you're working from different images. Align them as best possible and bridge the gap. But the reason I use these is because that's a common position you'll find yourself in. You won't always have access to the best images, best reference. So use what you have and kind of figure out the in-between. Alright, he's looking kind of cartoonish right now, but that's a start. Okay, I'm just gonna nudge some things around with that move brush, kind of build out some form, some areas, kind of bring it on to life. A little bit of the damn standard brush here and there. I went ahead and increased our resolution in Dynamesh because the face definitely needed it to do any sculpting. Typically, I like to cut off the head, but since there's no place to kind of cut his head off, I'm just gonna slowly increase resolution over time till we have enough to hold the face. Typically with a character, you'll have some clothing on or props. So this guy won't really have any of that, so I'll leave his head and body as one. Alright, it's working on the mouth area. Okay, he's slowly starting to come together. So unfortunately I forgot to hit record for about 5 minutes, but I'm going to go through the change in the picture form of how we continue to push the eyes, mouth, and ears with a damn standard brush. And we have a few placement wrinkles and a few more forms, such as the brow in place now. Now I'm just masking around the eyes. I do have some profile views of this cat. A lot of people like to take a good mean profile of this cat. Nice photo. So there's plenty of those online. Does have a good profile. And I'm just sculpting in some more creases I'm seeing in the eyes. And I'm sure depending on the age of the cats, they tend to have a different range, and maybe even the breed of the cat. Their wrinkles will change and their appearance will slightly change. Like some have a bit more fur than none. So interesting stuff. Just added a bit more resolution and dynameshed. And I'm just putting a little bit of work in the eyes. I'm not gonna put too much focus on it, just enough to kind of work on the face. We'll do what's typically done in 3D by inserting a sphere in the place of the eye. Now we'll carve out a cavity in its place. Just using the damn standard to work on some of the more prominent creases I see in my reference of choice. And I personally find it difficult if I have too many pieces of reference, which I tend to collect. So sometimes I'll pick some of the clearer or more informative angles and narrow it down to maybe 3 or 4 per area, like 3 headshots, maybe 3 or 4 full bodies, and so forth. Just pushing the cheekbones out a bit more. I feel like that's a common feature of the cat. This cat. Taking advantage of that masking to kind of protect the eyes as we make these edits. Okay. Clear the mask out a bit. Just looking at the transition between the neck, the body. Switching to the standard brush to lay in some slight wrinkles here. Standard brush is great for adding a bit of volume to these wrinkles. Back with the move brush and figuring out how things are working in the back of their heads here. Back to the standard brush. Just laying in a couple of these. There's a bit of a bunch up of wrinkles right in the back of the neck here. So something we'll be paying attention to as we continue to develop the many wrinkles that makes this cat. And We'll even use a bit of the dynamics and wrinkle brushes to help us. Right now, it's always good, even with those brushes, to build a foundation for wrinkles for the brushes to interact with. Okay, going to stroke mode. I'm just going to change my lazy step, just lower it so there's less spacing and gaps in my brushes. They're smoother. I'm just carving out some of these details in the ear, just loosely laying them in as I see them. Using a standard brush for that. It looks relatively smooth and with its light creases and folds inside the ear. And I'm constantly looking up at my reference and back down and just figuring out what brush I should try to get any particular detail. Typically I'll use the clay, or in this case, since we have most of the basic forms formed out, the standard brush. So kind of on our secondary shapes at this point. As well as the damn standard, which gets a lot of use. Your go-to crease brush. Okay. Typically I likely go over these with a bit of smoothing as well. Kind of soften things out. And then at some point in time we can come back and be more bold, add a variety of depth in some of these wrinkles and creases here. There's a decent amount of information on these cat's ears too. Okay, and we can kind of just simulate some of that just by picking a right camera angle and using our move brush to kind of nudge things around. Okay, like so. And now I'm just using a little of that damn standard to get some wrinkles in around the base of the ears. It's a whole ring of white wrinkles going around the base of the ears. And intermingling with the wrinkles that are kind of circling his eyes. Yeah. It's not my typical subject matter, but this is actually a nice piece of sculpt. I'm just looking for the best angle. Sculpt some of these inner forms between the eye and the nose here. Okay. And around the nose. Like so. Smoothing out areas. Just looking for the next thing to tweak. One thing I found interesting, I actually had to kind of Google it, was the fact that these cats don't have whiskers. I think some might, but I think overall they genuinely don't. or generally I should say. Just add a little crease in that nose there for a little bit of detail. We'll play with the, I guess, a general expression for the cat. At some point in time, we'll deviate and add a bit more artistic liberty to our cat here. Just paying attention to how the skull almost looks caved in at certain angles in my reference, so I'm just trying to get that in there as well. Just really trying to look at the most prominent notable features of the cat and make sure we get them in. And that's definitely the ears, the eyes, and I say the jaw area. Now I'm just spending some time around the ears, switching between trim dynamic to shave things down and the standard brush. Now to kind of carve out, make things look less uniform. Still use a bit more. Just going to carefully mask out the eye area here. Prep for its cavity. And just with the move brush, I'm just going to push that in like so. Just creating a socket. Okay, even a little bit of a tear duct there. Next, let's go into our subtools and append a sphere 3D. Just go to that sphere, scale it down, up, and rotate it just so the pole is facing outwards. Just a personal preference. I'm just going to put this into place. You can kind of pretend it's the iris if you want it. Just going to put it into place. Just kind of checking the depth this eye has in my reference images, especially from the side view. And we're going to go ahead and choose the Z-axis and mirror it. The mirror and weld button. Let's go into our transforms, switch to Z, and I'm just looking around all sorts of angles to see if this looks odd anyway. Just moving right along here. A nice large move brush, still making some decent form shifts all around the body. Just trying to build up form where it's needed. Trying not to overlook any small lumps as they may play a collective role to the overall form of any area on our cat here. I'm kind of going into these hind legs kind of blind, so to speak. I've never interacted with a hairless cat like this, so the way these folds form over the legs is something I'm just kind of judging looking at the pictures, which happens. So it's one of the reasons we collect many reference images to kind of build that understanding. I just grabbed the mask lasso brush to unmask the head, and I'm just going to place this here. I'm just going to scale up the head just a tiny bit, just adjusting my mask, placing it in the right area, and just scaling just a bit. Okay, felt like it needed just a little bit of a size adjustment. Okay. I'm just looking for other areas that need a bit more attention. Steady looking at my reference. I think now we're just gonna move around, giving attention to any area that looks like it could use it. The curvature is back. This tailbone area. In the future, I'll find a good front view to kind of check our shoulders, because I can't really tell what's going on from most of my side and 3/4 profile views. But I have enough to work with our profile view and some of the images I have off screen. Just slowly building up this area in the legs. Still deciding if I'm going to do anything in the pose department. These type of things you probably want to think of kind of early on, approaching these projects. If you're going to pose it later on, you might not want to sculpt the folds forming over his legs, or perhaps create a different version. All good ideas. I'm just noting the transition to the chest area up through his neck, the size, how the wrinkles bunch up and form underneath him. Even have some images of these cats from underneath. You can see how all those dynamic wrinkles interact with each other. Okay. And I'm taking it one step at a time, really trying to make sure we built that surface up to be relatively solid. I'm just trying to add some subtle musculature, some things I'm seeing in some of the images. All right, unmasking this leg here. All right, and I'm just kind of shoving things around, creating a bit of a crease in there, applying some smoothing. All right, and I'm using the damn standard brush to apply most of our creases here. And this area here isn't deforming like everything else. Slightly, we are in need of a dynameshing in that area. Something to look out for when you're using Dynamesh and shoving geometry around. Occasionally need to re-Dynamesh when things aren't deforming right. Just working on some of those high contrast areas that have a lot of dark areas in your photos are kind of contrast points to pay attention to. And now I'm coming back to his back and just laying in some folds. And as we work on this, I'm doing one or two things, deciding to just loosely, gesturally follow the surface details from the references, or try to accurately sculpt what I'm seeing in some areas. Try to get it as close as possible, or kind of take the idea of some of these folds and wrinkles and get something that's similar instead of exactly what I see at times. Occasionally I'll switch from different brushes to see what type of effects I get. Now I'm using the standard brush to kind of sculpt the indentation of his spine. And I think that's working out. Now, a little smoothing here and there. Okay. Just gonna adjust my Z intensity. Moving on now. Applying a bit of tension to the back of this leg here. It happens to have a bit of wrinkles built up. I want to say like mid leg. And I'm using the damn standard brush, but it's not really, I'm not really grasping the flow of these wrinkles right now. Kind of coming off like fur at the moment. But we'll come back to that. Sometimes we'll struggle with a area. And what I'll do is I'll just come back to it, give myself a bit of time to kind of process it or find the solution in another area or with another brush. There's plenty to do. Also coming back into these wrinkles and a few deeper areas to add that contrast. My ultimate goal for these wrinkles is to make sure I just don't leave them underdeveloped and ultimately capture the contrast in the right area. So we have a good bunch around his neck, his stomach, and definitely his face. So the goal is to definitely capture those main areas. And at some point, as I said before, we're definitely going to deviate and kind of take some artistic liberty here. All right. And just take your time. Try to fill things out. Experiment with different brushes. Maybe even pull up a video on YouTube or something like that and look at these cats move around. Maybe grab a still image. That's another good way to get reference. Now I'm coming back to these legs. These legs have a nice amount of wrinkles interacting with each other and some of my other off-screen references. Kind of have like two separate flows of wrinkles interacting with each other. So I'm definitely going to try to get that, not to mention the overhang of the flesh that we're sculpting in here as it folds over his knees. Okay. I'm definitely going to take some form shifts into the stomach area. Definitely build this up. Some loose strokes in here just to kind of connect the dots between these wrinkles. Now with a bit of standard brush, just choosing to use that to kind of fill the area as well as make some suggested wrinkles. Back to the leg. I'm gonna go back to using that standard brush to build up some of the high points of our wrinkles. And you really combine the standard brush with the damn standard and you'll really have all you need to create some convincing folds and wrinkles. I'm just using a clay brush to build form. It's the usual go-to brush for building out areas. You can build it up without too much of any surface indication. Like if you use the standard brush, that wouldn't be ideal for building form unless you wanted that extra ropey or veiny look. But it's definitely to each his own. It's one of the wonders of ZBrush. There are so many ways to approach your sculpt via brushes and other features. The legs are coming along. Starting to definitely see what's needed. I feel like the skin needs to change form here in this area, so I'm just using a move brush to make those changes I'm seeing as needed for this to kind of represent my reference. So just pushing and pulling. Okay. It's back to the move brush. Oh, nope. Switching between polish and smooth. Just kind of wanted to do the wrinkles in this area. All right. And I'm just taking notes to the directional flow from my reference. All right. Like I said, not 100% familiar with these. I'm kind of learning as I look at the images. All right, and then I'll lay in some strokes with the down standard and see if that kind of holds it or if it needs some supplemental help from the standard brush or maybe a bit of smoothing. Just continue to work on the hind legs here. As I said before in some previous demos, it's a good type of project to zone out, some music, maybe even a show. Nothing too distracting, just to help you stay in the zone, on the groove. Okay. So I'm starting to kind of commit to some of these creases here as I'm restroking some of them and moving on to some other areas here. As I said before, there's like a series of intersecting wrinkles here. As I assume like these might be like memory folds in the cat's skin, at least some of them. All right, just bring that all the way around like so. And now I'm just using the standard brush, occasionally holding Alt to carve into with that rounded tip. Okay. It's always good to zoom out even when doing details, see how things are kind of coming together at a distance. I think this is working. Somewhere around feeling right and almost too busy. But if that is the case, we can always come in and smooth out some areas. Okay. Now back to the front of our Sphinx here. And I want to kind of form out the wrinkles underneath his mouth, as his head will get a decent amount of attention as it is where his face is located. So just trying to smoothly transition those into his mouth. You can see our face could use a little bit more geometry, but we'll definitely get to that. Just unmask the bottom portion of his mouth just so I can kind of tuck it in. That seems to be the profile, better profile. Okay, pull it forward a bit. And even now I'm starting to think about how we're going to capture them. I've considered playful poses and props and things like that. You spend a decent amount of time sculpting, and at some point in time, once you're comfortable, start to consider how you can make up your presentation of your model. So kind of shifting them from a static pose, even a subtle head turn will add so much more character realism. Okay. Or anything really asymmetrical really help for that. Come in here, smoothing some of these strokes we made with the standard brush. It seems to work well with the way the skin folds work on the front and underside of the cat. This area definitely needs a bit of work, at least in the forms. Occasionally switching back to that damn standard brush. Now if you want, you can go ahead and use your selection tools to hide some of these legs, but I have a tendency to prefer to work obstructed. It gives me an idea what the viewer can easily see and what not, and what type of focus to put on areas at times. But if it gets in my way too often when we're detailing, I will go ahead and use the selection tools to hide something. Let's put a little bit more attention to these wrinkles here. The back of this leg. Just hit it with a round of smoothing, and now with the standard brush, just kind of coming in between these creases, trying to be a bit more intentional and less sketchy. Just ghosting these in here. Make my way around the edge, right into that crevice. Trying to make these look softer. Probably stand to change the angle or direction of these to kind of match my reference or the bunching angles. Just staring at my reference and seeing what I need to do. Kind of take this in a similar direction. This would be one of the areas that gave me a bit of frustration. But that's part of the process. Just figuring out how to figure it out. And so I'm kind of like changing the direction of some of these and changing the single swift strokes of some of those. All right. Choosing to come back to that at another point. And every time we cross it, I'm sure we're pushing it a little bit further to an acceptable state. Working more of these transition wrinkles here. Some of these areas look like they don't have much of any wrinkles, but the wrinkles are actually kind of very low, very subtle in height. Using more of that standard brush in the front here. And I said before, this isn't my typical subject matter, like realistic animals, even though we're going to deviate and have some fun with it a bit later. But one thing I can definitely say is it's definitely good learning practice. So in the event I find myself considering wrinkles, or maybe I'll find myself considering wrinkles having done a good amount of them in this particular project. So it all adds up. I'm trying to add some of this texture I'm looking at in the face of one of my reference images, where the wrinkles are really bunching up hard right around that jawline. And this is one of those features that differs greatly between species of this cat or the age of some of them. All right, just looking for our next spot to work on, down close to his paws. Just want to lay in some loose strokes of skin here after isolating the paws, so we can get some focused action in here. Just replacing that nub. I used the trim dynamic there to kind of decimate it. Good brush for destroying forms. And just using a move brush to kind of reestablish the shape, giving it a little bit more attention. Use a little clay brush at times. Okay. Now I want to start to build out the forms for the feet here. And kind of using a standard brush to kind of hint at the bones somewhere in the feet here. Okay, just kind of making a few strokes in here. Just trying to figure out what area to focus on. We're going to just move lower all the way down to the heel here. A little bit of the actual foot. Some loose strokes to kind of divide the foot up some. Bit of clay brush, build up that form. Just imagine that toe kind of curling a bit in there. So that's something to keep in mind. And just trying to find the best angle here. Okay. Realize these cats actually need a extra toe. They don't have 3, but 4 toes. So I'm kind of fixing that. Okay. And as you can tell, I don't own a cat. Just sculpting the underside of the feet. And working on that little pad underneath those toes. And just studying my reference. Figure out where to place here. It's a little knob. Okay. Bit of smoothing. A few more support strokes. All right. Pulling things out. I think we got a decent base for the feet. Just continue to nudge at this. And we'll have something pretty solid. Okay. A couple loose strokes horizontally gives some impressions of loose skin. And the direction of these strokes change in different areas, so trying to get that in here as well. Just increase that brush size, and I think I'm gonna come in here and smooth out these wrinkles here. My nemesis in this piece. And I'm attempting some shorter strokes and deciding to work on the underside of the stomach while I'm here. Don't want to ignore any particular area, even though it might not get much attention. doubt this angle will get seen much, if any. Just looking around. Okay. Let's come to these hind feet here and give them some attention. Just gonna isolate just this area. Using some polish just to flatten things out a bit. So a bit rounded. And this will help it look like there's some bones in it as well, just by flattening it out. So right now it looks very, very goopy, very clay-like. Even some of these bumpiness in our contour will add a little bit more of a realistic shape for these feet. Just loosely sketching in some creases for these feet here. And knowing to put not three, but 4 toes this time. Okay. And I'm going to use the dam standard to kind of carve in a kind of a groove in here. I believe there's a little bit of space between those toes and this pad. At least it looks like it to me. The clay brush is going to build up that section and then carve a crease around that with the dam standard. Just going to carve out a little portion here, like so. Then we're going to smooth it out. Just using the clay brush there. Smoothing, kind of reshaping this pad. I'm occasionally using smooth to just undo at times. Okay. And I'm very much just kind of sketching when I'm seeing in a reference. Just restroking these paws, these toes that is. Okay. I'm just carving in an area for our nails. Using dam standard and the clay brush to build some form and carve some creases. A little standard brush around the knuckles to get a nice roundness. Okay, a little bit more. Just seeing how things are working out in the images. Okay, so back to the leg area. Notice there's a bit more, maybe a bit more skin folding, but I'm kind of happy with what we have here. Might change the shape though. And with the move brush, just playing with the overall shape. Move brush is definitely just one of the favorite brushes. It has to be one of your favorite brushes. You end up doing a lot of nudging. Okay. And more nudging. occasionally changing the brush size. Often big brushes for soft, movements. Let's return back to these wrinkles here. My nemesis of this piece. And I'm just kind of building things up with the clay brush because we have so many polys. I can't get a super clean smooth, so I'm just building things out and then using a polish brush to just kind of rebuild that surface. I'd rather do that instead of redying a mesh or any type of projection to reestablish detail. Okay. So now I'm trying a slightly different approach after looking at other reference pics of this pose. And I'm trying to be a bit more strategic with the angles of these lines. Trying to follow a little bit more carefully and not to place too many as well. Just gonna mask off this area here, like so, using a mask curve lasso, or mask lasso that is. And just need to, all right. Just go ahead and continue to use the damn standard brush. Just paying attention to the wrinkles, where they start to fade away. Okay, and where some of them might even split towards their edges. Now they all pretty much fade into his normal skin, unwrinkled skin, so I use a lot of smoothing around those edges. Okay, just trying to get a good crease. Not too good of an angle for this particular angle, but just make it make sense. Okay. A few more form shifts. The move brush. Next, let's come and append a cylinder 3D. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. Stretch it. Scale it down. And stretch it. And move it upwards. So I'm going to perform a few edits. And what we're going to do is use this to create the tail. Once again, I'm just isolating these caps so I can go ahead and polygroup them. Next, I can go into the geometry palette and click the crease button. Next, subdivide a few times. And I'm going to uncrease and subdivide more. Next, I'm going to go ahead and dynamesh this to give us even more resolution here. All right, so you got a nice smooth base tail to start off with. Applied a little negative contrast. Bring the cat back. Now we're in transparency mode with the ghost option enabled. Bend curve. Add some points. Should be enough to start with. And I'm just gonna scale out some of these points just to create some size difference. And next I'm going to just move these around and form the curl of the tail. And most of the pictures of these cats, their tails seem to be kind of curled up beside them. So I'm just gonna go with that. So it seems a very natural position for the tail. Somewhere in this area. Okay. Just checking that from various angles. Now with transparency off. Just playing with the scale there. Okay. Just paying attention to that transition. We could add more points here if we wanted. Like so. Just edit that curve just the way you want. No rush to leave here. You could go ahead and finish it off from here with Move Brush, but it's best to make the most out of each tool when you can. Okay, it's not bad. Click the gear icon and click accept. Reposition my gizmo and apply inflate by control clicking. Some negative contrast. And maybe a nudge with the move brush. Okay. Some more move edits. Just looking at things here. Okay. All right. I'm just looking at the tail. Thinking about the curvature here. Thinking if I prefer something with a tighter curl to it. So I'm going to go ahead and just undo that up here. All the way back to the bend curve. Oh, let's undo that. We're back. Okay. I guess that was a glitch. But just reposition these points. That's amazing that we're able to go all the way back and just reposition these. But that's only if you have your save history saved. Would you be able to do that? Okay. From a file that you uploaded, that is. Okay. Yeah, I think I like that better than what we had. It's a bit more appealing. All right. And you pretty much get the idea. This is the type of stuff this feature was definitely created for. At this point, you're probably tired of me gushing about bend curve. It's a great asset to the tool set. Just click accept. And some more nudging with the move brush. Okay. And just getting it to just really lay on top of the body. Applying some smoothing at the tip. A nice large move brush. I'm just centering that tail to the spine. And maybe later down the line, I'll maybe merge this with the body with Dynamesh. Okay. Just making those those million nudges till you're happy and ready to move on. Okay, looks decent zoomed out here. Let's go ahead and move on. Now at this point, we're going to perform a few more nudges and edges to the shoulder areas here. I definitely need a bit more volume there to kind of transition into the neck area. Okay. Still making those 1,000 nudges till we're happy to any particular area. Unmasking the front feet here. Just cleaning up that mask with the mask lasso. Go ahead and blur that mask. Okay. Invert my selection. Now I'm just going to place my transpose line tool, that is. And I'm just going to click and drag that bottom circle on move mode. I'm just moving those front feet closer in the center there. And this is a little bit closer to the reference material I'm looking at. I think that looks better. You also get to see his hind legs a bit better from the front. And I'll just clean up this mask. We're gonna grab his hind legs here. Just want to make sure I have a nice rounded shape, no straight angles. And now I'm just using the regular mask brush here. Clean up and just round things off. This tends to make good deformations. A bunch of blur was applied. Dragging out my transpose tool. And I'm just dragging that bottom circle. That's essentially skewing the mesh in that area. Okay. Getting a bit of deformation on the back, a bit of clipping. Trying to see if I can do this any differently to avoid it and avoid stretching. That's fine. Sometimes you have to break your model in order to improve it or fix what you didn't see earlier. Either case. And now I'm just using the move brush with the mask still on and transitioning that back into the area we just deformed. Now with some polish brush, I'm just trying to smooth things out and fix what was into what now is. All right. It's a good helping of polish brush here. Zoom out. All right. And I think that looks better already. Continue to make these nudges. Coming in here with some standard brush, trying to establish some loose skin details. Right. Back to these front legs here. Establish a bit of loose skin here. And I'm coming back in there with some smooth after most of these strokes, just to blend everything together. And just using a standard brush, holding Alt to create these indentations, as well as wrap this texture fold around his leg. Shifting between that and damn standard occasionally. And occasionally hold Alt to carve into the mesh with the standard brush. Gives me a nice variation of support in the depth department. Bit of polish now. And back to the damn standard brush. And just trying to establish these folds kind of bunching up as they meet underneath or between his front legs there. And now I'm just kind of making those tweaks with the move brush to kind of fit. Yeah, I feel his legs should kind of be curving. A few more support creases. I'm really trying to be a bit more deliberate, especially areas that don't have a lot of wrinkles. I feel I have to be more strategic with the look of these, like these particular wrinkles here. So I'm taking a bit more time in their flow. Okay. I think that's pretty decent. All right, a little move brush. Change our direction, a bit of smoothing, never hurt. All right. Let's continue to support that with some more creases here. And just continue to use the standard brush. Carry this area out. See how things are looking from the side, from underneath. Perspective off for a moment. Grab my selection tool just to isolate the front legs so I can get a better look underneath here. Okay. Now unobstructed, we can easily make some smooth strokes in this area. Okay. Let's continue to inflate that stomach a bit there. The move brush. Push and pull other areas as well. I'm going to restroke some of these wrinkles in here. Once again, unobstructed so we can get a nice view and transition. All right. Just really paying attention to how these wrinkles are flowing at this point as we get closer to concluding these areas. All right, just building out some more areas in here, coming in with the standard brush occasionally to add some volume. Bit of polish brush in there as well. Okay. And I got perspective turned back on. Just rotating around. Turning back to the neck. Just wanted to use that standard brush. Create a bit more depth in here. Don't want to leave any area undeveloped or too undeveloped. So that was one of my goals for this. At least on the initial pass of details. There's really no limit to how far you could take this, even to maybe a pore detail. You could definitely take it that far. But our extents for this project will be the surface detail of these wrinkles. And I'm just focusing on a few here, kind of connecting parts of his body, some areas. Now moving back to the head and face. Just gonna pick an angle here to play with his brow. Just using that move brush. Just kind of move some things around before we likely come in and accentuate some of these creases. So here I'm just trying to build up a platform for his third eye. While I was doing some reference image collecting, I came across some pictures of Sphinx cats with third eyes, and I thought that was kind of cool. So here we are. So I'm just sketching in the shape of an eye. Kind of looks like a lemon for now. And got the shape I'm looking for. Some support edges with the standard brush. Some sharper edges with the damn standard brush, holding Alt. Just sketch in placement of the iris. A bit of nudgery to edit the shape. A little smoothing here to get rid of the tear duct because a symmetrical center eye. Would you rather have 2 tear ducts or none? It's my guess. I'm just masking the eye so I can pull up on the top of the head there. Okay. And just continue to nudge things with the move brush. A few marks on the ear. Is that something I'm noticing in my images? Okay. And I think we're just going to give a little extra love to the ears here while we're zoomed in. Just progressively upping the details as we kind of solidify these forms. So we're definitely in the detail stage. And I'm using Alt and standard brush. But now you can really see how organic sculpting can be done with just maybe 4 or 5 brushes, really. And just getting the most out of that standard brush, carving into this ear here. It really has an appearance that is deep. And maybe it is as deep as it looks. Okay. Just carving into that, to the head there. Okay. I think that definitely added to the ear. And as I said before, you can really get as little or as much detail as you want in your model. Continue to play with the brow here. Trying to get it to really envelope the eye, because I think I had a bit too much room there. Alt clicking with the move brush, occasionally to move in normal direction. That's looking, it's looking just about right. Now with a nice large brush, tweaking the contour of his face. And now with symmetry turned off, I'm just nudging the placement of his eyeballs and the scale and the depth. And back with perspective on. And if you want, you can use Sculptris Pro, which is a good solution for getting you some detail in areas. Okay, I'd push this a bit further before that. And I'm just paying attention to some of the shapes around the mouth, some of the creases I'm seeing. All right. And just mostly accentuating edges I already have here, or trying to pay attention to the direction of the wrinkles. Is there any stray wrinkles going in unusual or directions I don't have? Just trying to find anything interesting that's worth copying from the reference material onto the sculpt. All right. Looking at possibly a deeper crease here. Back to the move brush. A few more damn standard strokes. And since we're detailing, really just get into the groove of things and take your time if at all possible. Just decide to kind of connect this segment here. Just giving it a little different energy. It's different from the other wrinkles in that way. Okay. Back to the front. Just looking at things from this angle. Underneath. Just inflate that. Just bump up the brow a bit. Playing around with some more forms for the eye. See if that's helping anything at all. It's not bad. Might keep it. And some more wrinkles at the top of the head here. And zooming out. And back. And then what else needs to be worked on? I'm just gonna put a little bit more work on the eye area here. Working on the eyelid and the tear duct. The underbrow area. Okay, and I'm just constantly looking up from my screen to see what my next step is. All right, just zooming out and around. All right, back to the face here. Notice the ears look like they could use a little rotation. So I'm just blurring the mask around those. Place my Gizmo 3D. And you guessed it, rotate. Okay. I think that looks nice. Or if you even want it, you could just rotate one. I believe cats do that. Pretty sure I'm not seeing a cat do that. Now masking the eye. Unmask that portion behind it. And I'm going to use a move brush to push that socket in. Smooth it out. And much like before, I'm going to create a recess for a sphere. Ensure we keep a nice, perfectly round shape. And there's really no point in sculpting a sphere. Just went ahead and duplicate the eyes instead of appending a new sphere. Cause we can, I guess. Just center my gizmo. Centered it in the world space by clicking the home button. That way I know it's centered in the world as our cat is. And just kind of get it into position. All right, scale up some. And then we're going to use this to just kind of form the head around, or the skin in this area, and skull. We're going to maintain that eye shape, no matter it being a third eye here. All right, now with the move brush, just making those nudges. Okay, back with perspective on. Towards the late stages, is definitely ideal to spend more time in perspective mode. And now with Sculptors Pro mode on, I'm just applying a bit of smoothing as well as adding a bit of geometry. Be sure to turn that off when you're done. All right, and I'm just kind of sculpting a would-be iris here. And I'm just going to rotate that a bit. Might likely smooth that out later. Okay. Looking over the body. And I'm going to grab this cloth slide brush here. And I'm going to hide most of the model just to see what this brush does. The cloth brushes tend to work best with a limited resolution on screen. So that's why we have this portion hidden. I just disable use tablet. So this way I get a nice consistent size instead of my size being factored into my pen pressure. And you can see how things are bunching up as we work. Just playing with the simulation. It's one of the settings that can increase your performance if you lower it. Okay. It's not bad. Playing with the firmness. And this will change the size of our wrinkles. Just gonna turn the collision. And at max points, you definitely want to boost that up. All right. So if you want, you could kind of painstakingly use this with everything visible, but I suggest masking off or isolating sections with the selection tool. And then going to your mask, and here you have a mask by cavity button. ZBrush will apply a mask to your cavity, and if you want, you can blur it as I did. So if you use that in combination with the cloth slide brush, whichever cloth brush you prefer, you can get some pretty consistent and enhancement of your wrinkles. All right. And believe me, I went through a lot of trial and error. The cloth brushes are pretty cool, but they're really mostly useful for cloth and not necessarily skin. But this technique seems to work pretty well. But like I said, on small or mid to low poly meshes, this is simple and easy to iterate. And if we wanted, we could rebuild our subdivision levels and work there. But this is just how I work naturally. Okay. In fact, we do have, actually no, we're working with subdivision levels, so I mean Dynamesh. So now I'm unhiding most of our model here. And if you turn on flat mode, you can see what's masked real easy. And that was in the render settings. Go back in there and turn on preview. I'm going to apply the same cloth slide brush and masking combo. There's a lot of good or useful things in the masking options here. And I'm just zooming in to show you the topology there. When you get some artifacting or some crunchy looking textures, usually because your topology is a little heavily triangulated in the area. So if you want it, you could z-remesher and perform some means of reprojecting your details after that. That's if you're really invested in using your cloth brush. As we are, I'm pretty happy with our previous wrinkles, and I'm just trying to work out a technique and really seeing how far these cloth brushes can help push such a wrinkled subject. And we're really getting some good interactions, but at the same time, these brushes really do perform better with your model already being sculpted a decent amount. So do keep that in mind. Okay. Perform a little smooth after some of these as well. And how some of these wrinkles are bunching up together is worth the bang for your buck. Okay. Now to these legs here. I'm just sliding. Just sliding down the leg. Like so. And then I'll probably come back with a little bit of smooth. Just trying to do that. I'll hide the rear end a little bit more, invert, and we're going to do the same thing here as well. So do that. All right, just using that cloth slide brush to slide things around, and our topology is particularly bunched up in that crease there. There's a good chance we're going to need to re-Dynamesh to resolve that. So just bring everything back for a moment. Before we get to that, let me just play around with some of these wrinkles a bit more, just to see how things work unmasked. I think we actually still had a mask on there. Next, let's go ahead and open the Dynamesh settings. I'm going to go ahead and click the picker and drag it across here just to see the resolution. I'm going to increase it a bit than what the picker suggested. Re-dynameshed, and that should have retained our details with our new topology. Okay, so now we can get better deformation in that creased area, like so. And this isn't giving me too much here. I think it definitely worked better with the mask, perhaps. Yeah, it's debatable if that's giving me anything better, but you gotta try to find out. Alright, back up and looking our way around. Anything we can touch with this cloth brush. Let's turn my tablet sensitivity back on. And just laying in a few more loose strokes with the damn standard brush. Just a few more, just elongating some areas here. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and grab the cloth slide brush and interact with those newly added creases. Zoom in a bit, and you can see they're kind of bunching up as we drag over them, which is good. That does make those creases look a bit more natural. Just applying some smoothing here. Back to the head, tweaking the eye shape. Come in with the trim dynamic just to flatten that eyelid. Back to H polish. Just unmask the bottom portion. So I can make some edits like this. Play with the form. Just trying to accentuate things. Okay. Just really trying things out to see what'll make this look better. Okay. So I should probably be smaller, but I like that size. Moving on. Now we're going to go ahead and switch our material to the silver material. Give us a bit of specularity on our model. Next, I'm going to open our subtool list here and unmask the head. And we're going to pose the head and the eyes, just blurring the mask. And we're going to do this using the multi-select option. I'm just placing our Gizmo 3D right in the center of our neck first and rotate it, but we need to turn on the multi-select. Alright, now I'm just testing the rotation first. And now rotate. Now if you wanted, instead of doing this to our main body, you could duplicate this and do this on a separate body and set of eyes, or even use the layers Either way is fine. Or also save out a second version with the turn to hit. And with the mask still on, I'm just flipping back and forth from inverting it as I use the move brush to kind of translate between the previous pose and the new one here. Sliding things around and occasionally applying a bit of smoothing as well. And pushing this part back. Just take your time in our constant nudging here. It shouldn't be too difficult to get things to kind of line up here before we go ahead and redynamesh. Alright, occasionally changing the size of my move brush. I'm going to go ahead and grab this nudge brush. This is good for sliding surface details across a mesh. Just testing it out here. So you can see how that could help us with these wrinkles. Just playing with the Z intensity there. Get something that's not too intense. Very helpful, that nudge brush is for something like this. Back to the move brush. Really making sure I check from various angles before we decide to move on. I'm going to take full advantage of that mask before clearing it. Applying a bit of polish here and there. Trying to make sure his neck doesn't look broke ultimately. A bit of smoothing. Just come in here with a low intensity scale brush. Clay brush to fill the gap. Alright. Some more move brush. Continue to kind of play with that transition there. Alright. That's better. Now let's go ahead into our geometry subpalette. I'm going to use a picker to move across the model and kind of find the highest value. Then increase it a bit and go ahead and redynamesh by clearing our mask. And that's all done. Make sure you give a look over. Make sure you retained most, if not all, your details. Let's go ahead and do a bit more cleaning up. Definitely have to come in here and work on the transition of these wrinkles that we've posed to hit. Head and eyes. Just coming in with some standard brush. Like so. Let's go into my lazy mouse and just lower my lazy step. It gives me a nice smoother brush with less bumps in it. Okay. Just playing with that in a standard brush. Smoothing out some of these strokes. Alright. Make some smaller wrinkles in here as well. And it's good to work from kind of a mid distance and like this. Trying to reestablish some of these details. Trying to just add some irregularity here and not be so straight with some of my wrinkles, which is another thing I realize at this point. And you can do that with a jitter feature with some of your strokes. That's located in the stroke menu. just gonna go ahead and kind of ghost these in. Bit of damn standard. Add those creases. Like so. And even more. Now let's continue to reinforce some of our creases here with that standard brush. All around the neck. Back to the move brush. Just trying to make sure everything kind of blends together nicely. Add some more wrinkles to this part. This part saw a lot of stretching before we redecimated, so it's still pretty smooth. Some more nudging. Alright. Occasionally I'm switching to polish in order to flatten the area. Back in here with some damn standard brush. Offer a bit more variety and depth. Now here we are working the back of his neck again and part of his back. Just adding a few more strokes in between some of these wrinkles here. Like I said, just filling in that gap that we just deformed right in here. Using our usual combo of standard and damn standard brushes. Alright. For some of these I'm just kind of following the flow, and the other times I'm picking a particular wrinkle I may see and try to emulate that. Especially in certain areas. Right. When it comes time to detailing, you'll find yourself zooming in and just reevaluating the surface and what direction you want to go in. Bit of move brush, kind of get the curvature I want there. Zoom out. Okay. I think that worked out. Now we're going to go ahead and append a sphere 3D. And what we're going to create is a necklace for our cat ear. Go ahead and open the brush menu and hit create insert mesh in new. And just using the sphere, we'll just drag out spheres with this custom brush. But if we go ahead and switch on curve mode in the stroke menu, we can drag out a curve to create a link of it. So we could essentially make a beaded necklace just like that. So we're going to undo that and make a few edits here for our necklace. We're going to go ahead and squash this. Actually, we're going to go ahead and duplicate a second bead with no changes and a third bead. And on this one, we're going to squash in the x-axis direction. Invert my masking and kind of shrink and reposition things here. Alright, so I got kind of like an oval bead and two regular beads. I'm going to mask everything and append and or add by clicking on the primitive here. And I'm just going to rotate it and stretch it. If you remember, you can add primitives to your subtool if you mask off everything in your subtool, and that's what we did to get this cylinder here. I'm just making sure it's roughly the length of our beads. Next, I'm just hiding the caps like we did before, because I'm going to go ahead and get rid of them. as when we duplicate this across the curve, just turn it on double so you can actually see the insides of our geometry. So when we duplicate this across a curve, we won't have any caps in between. Okay, so that's why we're getting rid of them. Like so. Now that's roughly centered. Just gonna clear our mask. Next, let's go back into the brush menu, hit create insert mesh, hit new. And that's how we'll drag it out normally. But we're gonna go in and click curve mode. And now we have a custom necklace brush here. We have these gaps in the middle. We can fix that by going to the brush menu and expanding the modifiers menu. In here, click the weld points button and just simply click on your joint to adjust. Okay. I'm also going to come in here and increase my max bend angle. Oh, just go ahead and undo that and redraw that. And we're getting a relatively smooth results. Good enough for our cat here. Just gonna go ahead and hide that. Go to the body, the main body of our cat here. And with our new beaded necklace brush, I'm just gonna start drawing out the necklace. I'm gonna come back into the stroke settings here and turn off snap. So that way we can draw out freely in the space without it going too crazy. And if you click and drag while holding shift, you'll kind of smooth out your curve, which comes in handy. Alright, so make sure you don't click to commit as we just hover our cursor near the edge and drag to extend. Okay. And I'm just gonna let it float as it is as we try to complete this curve here. We'll be doing plenty of nudging soon to come. And curve brushes do require a bit of patience, so keep that in mind when using them. And the goal I typically use when using them is to try to get things as close as possible. If things begin to get frustrating, just resolve to using your move brushes to manipulate the placement. I'm just enabling liquid mode. That's another easier method of manipulating your curves. Just going to my modifiers here, making sure nothing particular is on. Okay. And I'm just going to nudge this, just trying to get it from being embedded in his neck too much. But that's an easy fix with a move brush or even scaling. You kind of want the necklace to kind of go between his front legs just for some visual interest. Okay, and once again, just trying to pull it out his neck some. And I'm clicking and pulling. Like so. I believe there's a way to connect this, but it's not connecting for me. But if I get the ends close enough, it'll look as if it's a full chain. So I'm just trying to get them to lay on top of each other, even if it's embedded in his neck here. Yeah, once before, just drawing between two endpoints would connect them, but I think that worked. Yeah, that did work. Okay, so that's one thing done. Click, hold shift, and drag to smooth. And after a while, even with the many settings on the curve brush, you just got to click to commit and just use whatever brushes, such as the move brush here, to make edits without too much deforming. I don't want to stretch any of these beads too much. All right, I think that's laid on his neck. All right. Okay. And you can try out any kind of bead pattern or alternative accessory you might have in mind. Maybe a top hat or a skirt or anything interesting. I'm just coming in here and smoothing this chain link, that cylinder that we put in the middle. Clearing the mask. And I think that came out quite all right. Okay. I'm just isolating it so we can go ahead and split hidden and add it to its own subtool. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Next, I'm going to go ahead and click append, select sphere 3D. I'm going to turn off perspective and place this sphere at the bottom, stretch and continue to place it. And the idea here is I want to add one more prop to round out our scene, and that will be a cloud, kind of a stylized cloud our cat will be sitting on. I'm just going to go ahead and turn on symmetry on the z-axis, so we'll have this look the same on both sides. And now I'm just kind of forming out the perimeter to get a nice decent profile for our cloud. And I kind of want something with some nice ornate curls on it. Okay. And just take my time, because we're giving it such a scale that this kind of requires it to, you know, compete with our piece. So it's kind of a balancing ground now. I want it to add to the piece but not overshadow it if at all possible. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'm just working around, just pushing and pulling with the move brush, more or less just filling things out before I dive in with any real sculpting brushes. Trying to decide if I want any of his feet shown or if the cloud will cover his feet, or if his front legs or anything like that. Retained a nice bit of negative space under his stomach. Just trying to figure out what looks nice for this shape and how it can add to the piece overall. Now coming in with the inflate brush, trying to see if that can establish some nice forms for the cloud. I have a couple of ideas on how to approach this, so this is the first idea, just coming in with the inflate brush. Also holding Alt to carve in with the inflate brush. It's helping me push and pull forms around. And at this point we have enough lumps to kind of steer this into some kind of direction. So back with the move brush, being somewhat more intentional. Also pushing and pulling things in directions just to see what it looks like. If that's better or not. Now with things isolated, you can kind of focus a bit more. Once again, turning things on and off as I do. Just holding Alt, clicking and pushing and pulling. Often rotating. Back to the inflate brush. Still just kind of filling this out before I come in here with the damn standard brush and start to fill out the creases or some of the designs. Kind of have a Eastern stylized cloud idea in mind. Back with the inflate brush here. It's doing a bit of overlap. Some of these forms, but we can always dynamesh if needed. Okay. It's getting pretty lumpy on that side. Alright. Redynamesh. Okay. Now the clay brush, I decided I definitely want more of a flatter look. I'm trying to establish some planes in here as well. I'm also diving in here with the damn standard brush just to carve out the edges of these cloud forms, as well as the first swirl of many to be sculpted in here. Kind of remind me of a Cinnabon or a cinnamon roll. And we just continue to sculpt these in here. It's really playing a balancing act, as this is a stage and a support piece for our cat. And I'm just figuring these things out as we go. I'm sure I'll be smoothing and redrawing some of these boundaries as I'm just kind of adding them, fitting them together like puzzle pieces. As if you were able to make your own puzzle pieces. Wouldn't make it much of a challenge. Right now, back with the move brush. Just playing with the form some more. Adding some swirls here and there. Just slowly becoming more confident in how I'm gonna put this together. I've attempted a design like this before in the sculpt, but not to this scale. So this will be a little bit of a challenge. Kind of figure it out as you go. And usually I work with things that have lots of reference, so this is it's a little different. It was good to get off the beaten path. Sculpt different things here and there. So starting off by mostly outlining these shapes, and then I'll come in and drop in a swirl in either direction that I feel that fits the area. I'm trying to make sure they're not all going in one direction. It's my idea. But we'll just kind of go with it. Okay. I'm going to change the size and angle of them as well. And hide when necessary, or isolate, I should say. You kind of get the idea. Kind of want to have somewhat of a flat surface, but not too flat. Like so. A little inflating there. I'm gonna build on this, but I want to kind of keep this on this level of detail. It might work if we came back and added another layer, but I'll possibly say that for the future. And another swirl in the opposite direction there. And just figure it out. Reshape. Like so. I'm also changing the spacing and sizes as we go along here. Messing around with the shape here in the rear. I think that's good. Just pushing and pulling. A bit of clay brush here and there. Remember, clay brush is great for filling in gaps, so whenever you need to fill in the opening, clay brush is your brush. Okay. A smaller bump here with a tiny little swirl, like so. I think that's working out. I like to try to get things to a almost done state to really kind of evaluate, or a pre-done state where I kind of loosely sketch things in. Now I'm just going ahead and switching to a spiral brush. And this brush could give some desired effects. I tried it earlier in the stages of figuring out this design. As cool as it is, I prefer just using the damn standard brush, but you might like it. That's why we're showing it here. And depending if you're holding Alt, will change the direction. It'll go in the opposite direction as you stroke, make tiny strokes back and forth. Back to the damn standard brush. We just about filled in most of the visible areas of the cloud. And I won't have you watch me sculpt all these. Pretty sure you can get the idea at this point. But I will go in and kind of fill in some of those less visible areas just to make things more complete. Like so. And just keep working all the way around. Here we are after a while of working on that clouds now. Just filling in some open areas, mostly on the bottom here. A likely area that won't be seen or will be edited so that it might print flat. So we'll see. Our options are open for that, but for now I just want to fill in some designs just to say it's some kind of complete. And I'm just picking different directions and sizes for these details here. Nothing too complicated, and as we worked on these I just kind of developed my strategy, or approach I should say, for filling in the area. And that's probably just how things work the more you do it. Come up with a some way making it happen. Alright, just approaching some of these last few areas here that don't have swirls on them. Back in with some move brush, with some masking. Just trying to redefine the overall form of this area. Like so. Even a bit of standard brush in there. And just continue to flesh out any areas you feel that's undeveloped. That's my goal here. this will be our last addition to our Sphinx cat here. I think he's relatively complete. Here is the end result of our Sphinx cat sculpt. I had a lot of fun and hope you did as well, exploring the handful of brushes and working on the plethora of wrinkles throughout. Continue to work on yours if you want. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next clip.